Hey, this is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Hope you're all doing well. It is Tuesday, which means it is time for the 49ers Throwback show. And like always on Tuesday night, I'm with my partner in crime, Suneil from So Real Sports Talk TV. How you doing, Suneil?
Good, Jack. Glad to be back on your channel, man. Last week we took a little hiatus on mine, and now we're back on yours. So back to reality.
back it was a pretty good show last week over on your channel. We had some pretty, I know we got a pretty good number of views and everything. So not all bad. I think we should, keep doing the back and forth thing. I think people will like it.
I'm down. But we got a lot to talk about today, Jack. Lot to talk about. So today was obviously first day of mandatory camp. You were there, right? Yes. Were you there for the whole day, or?
I was there for the whole day. Well, I got there about a half hour before practice started, and then I was there until about 3:30 when I finally got done writing and doing my shows.
So obviously, before we go into just your takeaways and all that kind of stuff, this was something that was, thrown together, I guess, pretty last minute, at least from a fan's perspective. Mandatory minicamp was supposed to be next week. They moved it up this week to the 7th. Did you get a sense of why Shanahan and the front office made that switch to make mandatory minicamp a week earlier than expected?
Yeah, actually, Matt Barrows asked that question in the press conference after practice to Kyle Shanahan, and Shanahan's response was basically, that they don't necessarily always like. He's never done a full 12 practice. You can have 12 off-season practice prior to training camp. He's never done the full 12. And just with everything, the way that things have been going, they decided to do the mandatory minicamp this week, get everybody in. The only difference really, in his opinion, between OTAs and this is the fact that they have to give everybody a day to get in and a day to leave, and they have to have physicals prior to it. So they did all that this week, and it's interesting to me. You would think that they'd want to try to maximize their practice time that they have available, but I also understand a little bit where they're coming from, considering the injuries that they suffered over the last couple of years during this time of the year.
Sure. And before, because obviously, there's some big news that we want to talk about certain players that were there, certain players that weren't there. But give us a sense, Jack, of what you saw out there. Like, what kind of drills were being run? Were pads there? Like, was there much you could take away from what was going on? Because obviously, when you were there for the beginning of rookie minicamp, there wasn't much you could take away because not too much was being done. Is that similar to what you saw today, or today was there a better sense of what players could bring to the table? Was there things you could actually take away from the action that you saw on the field?
No, there's definitely things you can take away from it. I think there's more that you can take away from even last week or the week before than you could from the rookie minicamp, just because the rookie minicamp was just the rookies, and so the guys that were the draft picks, they really stood out because that's why they were the ones that were drafted, right? Whereas now OTAs 2 weeks ago and last week and today in the minicamp, it's the full team is there, and even ramped up a little bit more today because you had Nick Bosa on the field and Trent Williams, and so. I know those are some of the names we're going to get to, but when you start having all of your top line guys out there, you start to see things kind of settling down, and those rookies aren't quite as explosive or dominating as they were when they were just going against other rookies. They start to look like rookies a little bit more.
Got you. So yeah, let's get into it. So all offseason, Jack, the faithful have been debating the quarterback situation. Trey, Jimmy, is there going to be a quarterback controversy? Nick Bosa and Debo are both could be extended. Are they going to be on the field? Are they going to hold out? Lots of doom and gloom. Lots of John Lynch doesn't know what he's doing. He should be fired. Kyle Shanahan is overrated. He should be fired. And first day of mandatory minicamp, Debo's there. Nick Bosa's there. Trey Lance is QB1. And obviously, Jimmy is not there rehabbing in LA. So it seems like all of the arguments and everything, excuse me, was much to do about nothing. But can we read into these guys being there, Jimmy being away, do you think that it's more than what we see, or is it like this is just par for the take?
I think this entire offseason there's been lots of different storylines, but I think there's been a great deal of overreaction to a lot of these stories, just because they were out there, and there's so many people talking about them, especially the Trey Lance one, for example. That story, I think, has just been overblown throughout, just from people not wanting to listen to what the team is saying or believing what they're saying. The Deebo Samuel one, I think, has been overblown as well. I was thinking about this morning. Something similar to this question this morning before I even left to go up to camp, is that, this just the way that this whole thing is played out, right? I mean, there's folks who have been saying that the 49ers should just trade Deebo Samuel, just get rid of him. If he doesn't want to be here, get rid of him. And it's just that, I don't know. There's just so many people wanting to just throw the baby out with the bathwater here. It just doesn't make sense with everything that this team has done over the last 3 years in particular, that you are reacting so harshly in one direction or the other. I think it's if you've learned anything over the last 3 years with the 49ers, it's to be patient.
Right. And obviously the faithful, as there's a reason why we're fans. And then sure, the brass is the brass, because they obviously have information that we don't have. All our information is coming from hearsay reports, and you don't know what to believe, what not to believe. So that was one of the biggest things I took from Shanahan, is it seems like maybe some of these storylines are not necessarily what's really going on in the locker room, right? So he discussed a lot about his relationship with Deebo. He goes off of what he says to Deebo, what Deebo says back to him. So I think that Deebo wanting to play for the 49ers, whether or not there's truth to him not wanting to play or whatnot, I don't think it's about the actual team as far as coaches and players. It seems like it's just more a money situation than not being happy with being a 49er. Would you say that would be accurate, or do you think it's more than that?
With it being just the money on the Deebo thing?
Yeah.
That's I'm pretty certain that's, we don't know it from either side, but I feel pretty certain that it's just about the money. And the 49ers, we know how they negotiate. That's been out in the media, time and time again. A few months back, I sent out I retweeted a story from, the negotiation of George Kittle, right? And how that one took place. And I think we're seeing the same thing. We know by now we've seen this team for 5 years under Lynch and Shanahan. We should know what to expect to a certain extent and the way they're going to do a business. And, these players are all, they're human beings too, and they want to get their money. They want to get whatever it is that they need or they feel they need and deserve, and they're going to push however they need to do it. And at the same time, I don't, we can be upset with the 49ers for not doing, things ahead of time. That's just not the way that they do it. And right now at this point, it's hard to kind of argue with what the team is doing as making it into a negative. They've been to the Super Bowl and the NFC Championship game 2 of the last 3 years. I think, you were talking earlier about, some of the overreactions and things like that. The start of the question, and I think that goes for some, folks that are covering the team as well as the national media. It's you got to kind of read the room a little bit, and sometimes the reality isn't quite as extravagant as we want to make it out to be.
Yeah, this being in the kind of not necessarily center, but being so close to all of the narratives that are happening with the 49ers, it really has opened up my perspective to maybe times I've seen this with other teams, right? Whether it be New England or Indy or, some other teams where there's been like national media, national stories and all this kind of stuff. It made me take a step back and be like, man, all of those could have been BS. Like they could be completely farther from the truth, because being closer to this, obviously with guys like you and, being able to, me paying attention so closely, I'm like, man, the national media, based off of what we're hearing, is completely off. So it kind of puts things into perspective. I know there's guys that there's a lot that of questions that I have to ask. But let's start, I guess, with the biggest one. And that's obviously Trey Lance seems to have the keys to the castle at this point. He's QB1. A lot in the presser was asked about his throwing motion and all these type of things, what he focused on in the offseason. Kind of brushed it off a little bit and said, look, that was a little bit bigger. Even threw a shot a little bit at Grant with his slow motion video and whatnot, which is pretty funny to see. But my question to you, Jack, is it seems like the team around him, everybody is like, wow, like it's just wait for it. Like he's gonna be, explosive when he gets on the field for, his shot. What are you seeing, I guess you can see, because you saw him last year in minicamp. Now you're seeing him a year later. Are your eyes seeing any type of difference?
With his play on the field, I would say it's a little bit so far. I mean, what we've seen from him in through 3 days has been very consistent, right? The media's been there for 3 days, one in week 1 of OTAs, one last week, and then now today. So we're going to get 3 straight days to watch him and see how he performs. But what I've seen of him has been somebody that's been consistent. He's consistently done certain things well. He had one he had one deep ball today that wasn't good, but other than that, he was on target for most of the practice and did well. And he's done that throughout. I think Trey Lance has been really impressive. And, I think the takeaway for me right now through 3 days is that he is at the level of Jimmy Garoppolo at least, right? Which is positive when you consider that he's only going into year 2 and he's only started 2 games. So I think the offense with him running it is at that same level as what they were with Jimmy Garoppolo last year during the season. And I think that's a big positive for a guy who is as young as Lance is. And we know he should continue to develop and grow as he plays.
Now, we hear a lot of the positives, right? As far as, he's completing the ball better. His throwing motion seems a little bit quicker. He's trying to focus on spinning the ball a little bit more. You said for the most part, he's been pretty consistent. If you were projecting, obviously we're talking about few days, so this could be maybe not even a fair question to you, Jack, but from what you're kind of seeing, what do you think are going to be his biggest strengths on the field next season? And what are things that us as fans should be patient on with him that you might be seeing as far as deficiencies that need to be worked on throughout the years?
Yeah, I don't even know if I would say there's anything that's like a deficiency. I think it's just if people are expecting Lance to come out and the ball to be sailing, 40 yards down the field constantly, they're going to be disappointed. If they're looking for a quarterback that can deliver the ball to all points of the field, take the shots down the field when they're there, but also hit everything underneath and take what's given to them, that's what you're going to get out of Trey Lance. So you got to have some patience, and it's not going to be just bombs away. The ball, I think, is going to go down the field more often than we've seen. But it's not like it's going to be a constant barrage of deep balls. It's just not going to be the way that it looks.
Now, I know decision-making has been something that people may have questioned with Trey. Last season, for all the positives that we've seen, and as far as like he's developed each game, we've been able to see him play. He does tend to there were some balls that could have been intercepted that were just dropped by linebackers and stuff, like where he may be thinking that the ball's going somewhere or he doesn't see the coverage quite there. It might be too early to really get into that, but have you been able to see maybe better decision making from him as far as protecting the ball and maybe not putting it in places that are, I guess, quote unquote, dangerous as far as turnovers?
I think he's always been pretty good with that, for the most part. Today he had his first interception of the offseason, but even the interception was a perfectly thrown. He took a shot to Brandon Ayuk, and it was, they're deep in the red zone, started on the 5-yard line, so they didn't have a lot of room to work with, and he tried to get the ball into to Ayuk on on an out route to his right side, tried to stick it on him, and he did. He put it right on his hands, and it should have been a touchdown, but Ayuk ball bounced off of his hands, and the DB was right there and was able to grab it and intercept it. But I haven't seen a situation where I felt like he tried to force something in there and it should have been an interception otherwise. His incompletions that he's had have been, just maybe a poor throw that just sailed into an open area kind of thing. It hasn't been that bad. Today he had 4 incompletions, and 2 of them, the one was off of Ayuk's hands, and the other one kind of was as well. It was a combination of Ayuk dropping it and the defensive back, Emmanuel Mosley, getting in there to break it up.
Obviously, we know the relationship between Ayuk and Trey is good. They work together a lot through the offseason. Are you seeing on the field any other chemistry with maybe another receiver? Last year, obviously, you got a lot of chance to work with Trent Sherfield, and that combination a lot of people got excited about, even though it necessarily didn't come into fruition throughout the season. But are you noticing early on maybe some favorites that Trey might have, or some connections that might look prosperous going into the regular season?
He had a pretty good job, a really good connection, it seemed like, today with Juwan Jennings. They hooked up a couple of times early on in practice and in the 7-on-7 period in that red zone, a couple of touchdown throws from Lance to Jennings there. Lance, and they hooked up a little bit later on in a 3rd down situation drill that they're working on. So I think that's one. If you're looking outside of the Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, group, it'd probably be those 2. And then also it seems like Ray McLeod gets a number of balls thrown to him every day.
And that's the next question. We're going to keep it on the offense for a while, Jack, and then we'll go to the defensive side. But one thing that I kind of have praised the front office for doing is I think that they've developed a much stronger much stronger receiver room than they have in previous years. I think the options 4, 5, and 6 are better than last year's options 4, 5, and 6. But I think there's 7 or 8 receivers there. Only 3 probably are going to make the cut, right? I think they'll only bring maybe 6 receivers. So out of the 3, obviously Ray is going to be there. Who do you imagine, or is out of the 2 other spots that are there? Are there receivers that are kind of separating themselves as far as who's going to round out the back end?
Well, I think if we look at it real quick, just to kind of write them down so I can keep track of it myself, I think we know that we have Deebo Samuel, we know we have Brandon Ayuk, and then at number 3 you have
Jennings,
and then I think behind Jennings, Ray McLeod is going to make the roster. I think based on the contract they gave him and what they used to bring him in, I think that's an easy one to pencil in. Maybe you can put that in pen. And then on top of that, you have Danny Gray. So that leaves you with 5, right? And they're going to go with 6. So there's only going to be one more that's going to be out there. And I think that, Malik Turner is a guy that stepped up and looked really well. I think Marcus Johnson as well. That's one of the things I agree with you wholeheartedly, that the back end of the receiver room is better this year than it was a season ago. So, I don't think there's anybody from last year's roster that is as good as what we've seen already out of Johnson and Turner in terms of the plays that they've been able to make on the field. Johnson was open deep today, and that's the one that the ball just kind of sailed, and it was just a flutter ball from Lance into the wind. And then Malik Turner had just a terrific catch in the back of the end zone for a touchdown from Nate Sudfeld. So it's a really strong room.
And and I mean, so obviously Danny Gray has shown some flashes, so you would assume he can make it. I think probably out of the 2, Malik might have it might be his job to lose just because of his familiarity with the special teams coordinator. And he might be, that 6th position might be somebody who needs to play a little special teams. So I would think it is between Johnson and Turner. And it's just about, if Johnson could separate himself, because I think if they're close, they'll probably go Malik Turner out of just familiarity with the special teams coordinator. Yeah,
and that would make sense. And then they also have Mac. He's been doing a really good job. He's going to get a number of balls thrown his way too. I mean, all those guys in the back end of the roster there at the receiver group that 6th spot is going to be hotly contested. And Ray McLeod, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be looked at to play special teams from that unit. And I think
Mhm.
you could be on the right track. That whoever is a sixth guy needs to be able to play special teams as well.
Right. So let's move it. Obviously, I want to spend a lot of time on the offensive line, but let's go before we go offensive line, running back room. And one thing that I give you full credit for, Jack, and even when I'm not on the show with you, if I get a chance to bring it up, I bring it up. Your ability to call out Elijah Mitchell, you were the first person that I saw that really was like, hey, guys, look out for Elijah Mitchell. He might actually be better than Trey Sermon, and it actually came into fruition. That running back room, though, is a little bit more interesting than I think last season because the main four, quote unquote, or five, quote unquote, kind of seem like clones of each other as far as build, style of running, size, all that kind of stuff. And that's different from what we're used to with a guy like Mostert, a guy like Breida being able to come in and be a change of pace, kind of track speed type rushing attack. What are you seeing from that running back room? And do you think that there's a philosophical change now that Anthony Lynn is there as to why they have so many similar quote unquote style backs and why and them shifting away from what they had so much success in 2019 with having that change of pace speed?
I don't know if I would say there's a major difference, but you're right in that there all these everybody that they have from the running backs other than JaMychal Hasty are big backs. They've got a lot of size in that room now, and we haven't even really seen anything out of Tyrion Davis-Price, who they used a third-round draft pick on. Even the speedy running back that they have, Jordan Mason, he's a big back as well, 220, 225 range. So. I think the difference is partly that you have Trey Lance and you're going to see a little bit more shotgun, and that's going to put the ball between the tackles a little bit more often. So there's definitely going to be a pounding that these guys are going to have to take with running the ball inside. So I think that could be part of their change up that they're going to see. You'll see a lot of Trey Lance out of the gun today. He was a little bit more under center at times, but I would just expect to see maybe some more between the tackle running.
Is anybody separating themselves? Obviously, we haven't been able to see Tyrion, but are you seeing flashes like you saw from Elijah Mitchell out of anybody? Even maybe some of the guys that have already been on the roster, but a guy like Trey Sermon, who didn't show obviously much in the regular season. Even a guy like Wilson Jr., who we know can be good, but last year was not necessarily all the way fully there. Are you seeing healthy running backs there? Are you seeing explosion that wasn't necessarily there last season from anybody?
Well, I think the guy that there's only one guy in the running back room that's really showed explosion so far this offseason, and it's been Jordan Mason. He's been extremely explosive every time he's touched the ball. We saw it again today with a simple catch in the flat where it's during team drills, and so that they don't tackle right because they're not in pads, but they tag him down and the linebacker was in perfect position to chase him down and get that tag on him pretty quick. But Mason's just so fast, he was able to turn the corner without getting touched and up the sideline for about 10, 15 yards. And it'll be interesting to see what he looks like once the pads come on. And I think he's going to be pushing somebody on this roster to be able to keep him off.
That's going to be interesting. Now, obviously, the biggest question on the offensive side is with the retirement of Alex Mack, how this offensive line is going to look with, possibly three positions with new players in, right? Depending, or at least positional wise, depending on, what happens with Brunskill. But through the presser, it kind of seems like there was only one option, which was Drake Brendel. Like everybody's kind of talking as if he is the man that's going to be taking over the starting job. As far as who the personnel that's going out there with the first team reps, can you speak to us a little bit about the combinations that you're seeing and then move into, how people are looking out there?
Well, first off, the center position, we have Alex Mack retiring. And so that's kind of where everybody's focus has gone. And, Jake Brendel is a guy who I've spoken about this a couple of different times, and that his measurables from his pre-draft workouts matched up better than Jason Poe, right? And the only reason I even mentioned Jason Poe is because everybody went so gaga over him during the run up to the draft because they saw him running around as a fullback and doing all these different types of things. They saw him run a 4.8940, but then you start getting into the, like the 20-yard, some of the drills that are dealing with agility and those types of things. And all of a sudden, Brendel just jumps off the chart at you at those things, much better than like a guy like Yuan Poe and so on and so forth. And so I think that we might be sleeping on him a little bit. That's definitely something to keep an eye on. He was brought to the 49ers by offensive line coach Chris Furster. They had worked together in Miami in 2016 and 2017. And it was Furster who, lobbied to bring him into the 49ers in 2020. So we'll see how that plays out. I think there's going to be a little bit of a battle going on between him and Daniel Brunskill. We'll see if that is actually what transpires once they get to training camp.
Did he opt out of the 2020 season?
He did. He was a late opt out due to the COVID stuff.
Because so one of my arguments for why I believe Daniel Brunskill was going to be the starter, Jack, was that 2020 season, right? Because he started 8 games and he held up pretty well. I mean, he only allowed 1 sack. Pressure-wise, I think it was something around 15, but that's with Nick Mullins back there, who isn't the most athletic. However, it changes because I did hear Shanahan talk about Brendel actually opting out of that 2020 year. And that I think is interesting because we might not have seen Brunskill at center if Brendel was there, right? He most likely would have moved in there and been the center there. I thought it was because they wanted Brunskill over Brendel, but Brendel wasn't there. That was something that I missed. So in your estimation, based off of everything you're hearing, everything you're seeing, are you pretty confident that Brendel's going to be the man to start coming into the regular season at center?
It's kind of that's the direction that it's trending right now. And based off of what we've seen so far and what we heard from Kyle Shanahan today, I think that's a very high likelihood that it's going to be Jake Brendel. They seem to really like him, and they have a background with him, like I said, with Furster, and it just seems like that's the direction that they're leaning towards.
And how have you seen him out there? Like, do you think that he's going to be able to hold up with the position there? Is that a position that you think becomes deficient now that Mac isn't there, or do you think he could play well in that role?
We'll see how it goes. I don't right now it's kind of hard because they don't have pads, so it makes it a little difficult, but at the same time it's not awful. You can get a little bit of a view from it. Even Kyle Shanahan mentioned that today. You can still see the way that they're using their hands and the way that they're moving with their feet and those types of things. There's a lot of things that you can see how they're doing. And I wouldn't say that the center of their offensive line has been a weak point to this point in camp and what we've seen, through the OTAs and today's minicamp practice. Now,
other than the center position, I think the other position that we're not certain who that starter is going to be is right guard. I think with Brunskill out with knee tendonitis, Jalen Moore has been getting some opportunity there. Do you think there's a realistic path that you see with Moore moving into that right guard position and that moving Brunskill more to the bench to be kind of like a depth piece versus a starter? Are you seeing any flashes from Moore where he can actually outshine the play that Brunskill has on the field?
I think it's going to be hard for Jalen Moore to beat out Brunskill. I think Brunskill is the person who they're maybe expecting to be that right guard this season. I know Moore's been getting all the reps there, but that's because there's been no Brunskill there. And I think that's also why I feel like Brendel's going to be the starting centers, because if you're going to be making a bunch of changes along the offensive line, just make the one change. Make the change at left guard. They have to make the change there. You got to make a change now at center. So let's leave the other 3 positions intact and not completely upset the apple cart just to go. And Moore's an interesting player to watch because he's done okay inside at guard, and it seems like he's struggled when he's been asked to play right tackle.
Okay. So you think he's more of a guard than a tackle?
So far, he's been able to protect the passer better. When he's been out at the right tackle spot, he's been beaten. So like I wrote today in my write up, he got beat by Kerry Hyder today, ripped him around the corner on one of them. It was during team period, and Trey Lance was in at quarterback, and he just was able to get to the outside shoulder, the upfield shoulder of Moore, and turn Moore. He was able to turn the edge, and if it had been a game, Trey Lance would have been sacked. But because you can't touch the quarterback in practice, he was able to get the ball off for a completion to Jeff Wilson Jr., but it would have been a sack in a game situation.
Okay. How about Aaron Banks? I know some of the fans in the comment section are asking about how's Aaron Banks look now that he's most likely the starter at left guard.
He's looking better. He's transformed his body a little bit over this offseason, and so far from the 3 practices that we've been able to watch with Aaron Banks out there, he looks good.
He's not getting. I know one of the issues last season was mostly him getting pushed around a little bit at the line of scrimmage. Has he been showing more strength there? Is he, because you saw him last year and you were kind of mentioning to me, I don't know if we did it ever on camera, but definitely off camera, you said, he doesn't look that good, but it seems like he doesn't look the same last off season.
Well, he was struggling a little bit last year because it was on the right side. I think that was kind of what it was a little bit of a troublesome for him because he was on the opposite side of where he normally is, or had been during his time in college. So now that he's back over the left side, he seems more comfortable, and he's able to. He's been holding up much better.
So more than likely, the offensive line is going to be Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Brendel at center, Brunskill at right guard, and then more than likely McGlinchey whenever he's healthy. If for some reason McGlinchey can't start the regular season, who do you look to as probably starting at right tackle in that case?
Well, right now the 49ers are looking hard at Justin School at right tackle. He's been working really hard over at that spot so far. Him and he's been at one side, Colt McKivitz at the other side, and then on top of that, I think those are the two. You have Jalen Moore as well, and he's worked on the outside, but I'm not sure what his role is going to be there. If they're going, we'll see how he plays out. The offensive lineman to keep an eye on for me right now is Spencer Burford. I'm really interested to see what happens with him moving forward.
Where is he playing when he does get reps?
Primarily at right guard. He's primarily been at right guard. He has the ability, he's a tackle in college. There's been a lot of talk about him sliding inside to guard, and that's where we've seen of him over the last throughout the OTA practices. He's been more at the guard spot, but he's his scouting report talked about his hand strength and those types of things, and he's been very solid. I mentioned Jalen Moore struggling a little bit out there with Kerry Hyder. Spencer Burford playing right guard just was able to stand up Eric Armstead last week during practice.
Wow. So, we talked a lot about the offensive line. Let's go, to their counterpart on the defensive side. So you mentioned Kerry Hyder, getting to the quarterback against Jalen Moore. Out of that defensive line, obviously we know, Bosa, Armstead are going to be for sure starters there. We're thinking Kinlaw. Who's kind of separating themselves as far as the opposite edge of Bosa that you think might be the starter there come the season? Has anybody separated themselves, or is it still too early to tell?
Well, I think it's probably still going to be, Samson Ebukam, who was the player opposite him last year, continues to show up. On top of, other than Samson Ebukam, Kimoko Toure has shown up well as at the that spot on the outside opposite of Bosa. So I think those are the two primary guys to keep an eye on. Everybody wants to hear about Drake Jackson, the rookie who they took in the second round, and he had a little bit of a rough practice today. It was really the first time we've been able to see him go up against anybody, and it was impressive entering individual drills with them when they went against the offensive lineman. Sam Schluter, the undrafted free agent that they signed out of Minnesota was able to hold his own against him very well for 3 reps in a row.
What are you seeing as far as maybe opportunities for him to grow? Is it strength or speed or just moves? Like, I guess how deep his bag is that you're seeing is the biggest issue.
Yeah, I don't think his bag is all that deep right now. I think it's pretty much about speed. And if you're a tackle that can get off the corner and gain a little bit of depth and make him have to run around you, you're going to be able to hold him out because that's really what he has. He doesn't. At least so far he hasn't shown any other moves. I mean, we're early into this thing. You know, we're only what would that 4 weeks or whatever of practice, but you would have. I was expecting to see maybe a little bit more out of him than I've seen so far. At least what I saw today.
Now, there's a lot of defensive linemen out there, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Last year they kept 11, but I think there's much more than 11 out there, right? So all of this might be too early, but who are some guys that might be on the bubble that you need to see maybe something out of for them to actually make the roster?
Yeah, I mean, so when you start, looking at that kind of stuff, those are guys like Maurice Hurst, right? It'll be interesting to see what happens with, Kevin Givens. I think is going to make the roster. I'm just kind of looking through it right now, real quick, and
all I know is my guy Jordan Willis is definitely making the team.
Well, I think that Amenahu is a guy too who maybe some people might put on the bubble, but I think he's going to be one of those guys who's going to be more of like an interior pass rusher when they get into their nickel situations and things like that. So I would say the bubble would be if you're looking for bubble guys, Jordan Willis, Kevin Givens, Alex Barrett. Alex Barrett's been around the team for a couple of years. I think those are the 3 that people might know. And then they have Kalia Davis, who they drafted in the 6th round this year, who hasn't practiced at all yet. So he's likely to be on the the physically unable to perform list. Same thing with Kevin Atkins. He's one of the undrafted free agent rookies that they brought in. So when you want to talk about the guys who are going to be on that bubble, Willis, Givens, and Barrett, I think.
I hate that you said Willis. Willis saved against Green Bay. We would not be past Green Bay if it wasn't for Jordan Willis, man.
Well, the thing to look at here is you also, they have just so many guys, right? Kerry Hyder Jr., Charles Amenahu, Teray, that signing of Teray, he just seems like a clone of Samson Ebicom in terms of like what you're looking for out of that position. And then you add now Drake Jackson to the mix. It's just an embarrassment of riches in the way at the defensive line spot for the 49ers. So there's going to be some really good players that are going to be left off the roster.
True. Now, I think a lot of people are excited about the secondary, but before we get into that, obviously we have probably our most stable position group is going to be the linebackers with 3 really guys that separate themselves from not only on the team, but I would say in the league as well, in Warner, Aziz, and Greenlaw. I know all 3 of them probably aren't playing because I know Aziz is still nursing an injury. I don't know how much work Warner and Greenlaw are getting, but outside of those 3, who are who I guess out of the linebacking core are you seeing? Is anybody flashing? Is anybody separating themselves as far as who that next wave of linebackers are going to be?
The linebacker group that's a solid group, and there was no Fred Warner today, no Dre Greenlaw, and Aziz Al-Shaair wasn't out there, so it was pretty much Warren Burks, Curtis Robinson, and that group, and I think the 5 that's going to make the roster obviously is going to be Warner and Greenlaw and Al-Shaair, Flanagan Fowles, and I think Burks. I think that's going to be your 5, and Curtis Robinson's going to push it a little bit, and there's going to be 1 or 2 of those guys that are going to be on the practice squad because this is a again, you mentioned it. It's a really strong room, and trying to add pieces to that group. Burks is kind of the only one that I think where they have a spot, unless Al-Shaair or Fowles is not able to be full go as far as strength and health when the season starts. Got
you. And then a lot of obviously young guys in the secondary. Let's go specific to the cornerback room because obviously Ward, Shanahan said they're just resting him. I'm sure Mosley, you said Mosley was out there catching interceptions. Outside of those 2 who we know are for sure going to be, on the roster, probably starters, Are we seeing much from Ambry Thomas, Lenore, Womack, Verrett, like Dante Johnson? Who's out there on the field and who's out there kind of, showing what they're flashing, I guess you could say.
Yeah, Ambry Thomas has been starting in place of Travarius Ward the last couple of practices. Like you mentioned it. Ward has been. They're just giving him some time, to off, right? Playing it smart with them. So Thomas steps in, and that just shows how deep this team is. That was their starting unit last year was Emmanuel Mosley and Ambry Thomas, and right now that's one of their backups. So that's a really strong group. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out when Jason Verrett is healthy and when he comes back, because that room all of a sudden is really strong. I know you wanted to kind of stay out at cornerback, but I think we need to talk about nickel if we want to talk about nickel corner a little bit too.
Sure.
I think, Dark
Denard, right?
He's still getting the first team reps, but they've given a lot of run to Sam Womack now at the nickel spot over the last couple of practices, and this is a guy when you line him up and if you ask him to cover in that inside there, he's going to cover the heck out of it, especially in man coverage. He struggles a little bit with the feel of the zone from inside. He's a little bit better with the zone on the outside, but Womack's a heck of a cover guy, and Diamondor Lenore just got toasted today. It was Brian Ayuk that did it to him, so that's not necessarily anything that to say that shake your turn your nose up at. But at the same time, that's a NFL level, top level NFL wide receiver that we know they're going to be facing this season when they go up against some of these teams that they have to go against. So Lenore, I think, might be in a little bit of a tough situation this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first year I think under Kyle Shanahan, Jack, where there's just so much options there at corner. How many corners? Oh, did we lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. How many corners do you expect them to carry on this team? And right now, just a rough estimate, who do you think actually makes the roster?
Let's see. So at the quarterback spot, I think they're probably going to have a good 5 to 6, maybe 7 guys at the cornerback spot. And then at safety they might only have 2, so that would be 11 total defensive backs that make the roster. I think the whole thing here is really Jason Verrett's health, right? That's going to be the one that kind of mixes up the rotation a little bit. I just have a feeling that if you're looking at that, it's probably going to be Travarius Ward, Emmanuel Mosley, Verrett, Ambry Thomas, Sam Womack, and then after that maybe Tariq Castrofield, Dante Johnson. I think Darquez Denard, he's been running the nickelback spot, so he's kind of Ward, Verrett's health and Denard continuing to play at a high level. Those are kind of the question marks of changing up that room.
So Lenore probably doesn't make the team, is what you're saying?
That's one who I know that they liked him and but I think he's definitely on the bubble this year.
Makes sense. Now, obviously, the safety position, who's going to play alongside Jimmy Ward is a big question mark as well. It seems all the indications it's Hufanga's job to lose at this point, just from the talk and how Jimmy Ward is talking up Hufanga as well. How does that safety room look right now? Who's on the field and how are the guys looking out there that are playing?
Yeah, I think when you look at the safeties, it's going to be Jimmy Ward and Talanoa Hufanga. I think that those are your starters. And then you have George Odom and Tarvarius Moore are going to be the two that are behind them, backing them up. I think that's the way that it's going to be situated. That's where Dante Johnson kind of is an interesting one because he's been getting a lot of reps at the safeties position, but he has that ability to play throughout all the secondary spots. And so that's one of those interesting pieces to their roster puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this is probably the deepest secondary that we've probably seen under Shanahan's tutelage, I guess you could say, as far as just especially at the cornerback room. I think some people are a little bit questioning what the safeties are capable of, but I imagine with a higher level of cornerback play, the safeties aren't going to be asked to do as much as they have in previous seasons when, the corners may not have been as good in coverage as these guys are. Would you say the same, or do you think they're going to still ask as much as Ward and Tart were asked to do as far as saving some plays like they were in previous seasons?
No, I think the goal with what they've done in the offseason was to allow the safeties to not have to be such a big portion of their in their coverage scheme, right, and allow them to be able to be a little bit more playmakers. And I think that's, with a guy like Travaris Ward, if he can lock down a side of the field, that's going to allow the safeties to be able to, maybe be in position to be a little more aggressive in making plays and those types of things. So I think we haven't seen it all that yet, but I think this secondary group is going to be able to provide much tighter coverage than they did a season ago.
That's great. So Jack, I mean, we're pretty much at a little past 45 minutes, but if you're going to sum up, mini camp for right now, what are the biggest storylines to come out? Biggest things that we need to be paying attention to going into, the rest of mini camp and, training camp coming up in the next, few weeks or so?
Well, I think the first one was Deebo Samuel showing up today. I think that's a big story. I don't know if anybody should be shocked by it, but it's just a big story because of the way that everything played out. In terms of the storylines, the center is going to be, what happens there is going to be something that we're all going to be keeping an eye on. Jake Brendel I think Jake Brendel is probably going to be the starter there unless they bring in somebody from the outside, which may or may not happen down the road. I got so many bots over here. I'm having a hard time knocking them down.
I feel like it's the same one over and over again.
It might be. They really want us to check that out. But, as far as the other storylines, I mean, just trying to go back through and think of everything that we've talked about. But, the depth of the defensive line going to be a key. The nickelback position is one of the nickel safety. And I think those are the spots that are kind of up for grabs. The running back room, I will say this, I think the running back room has a lot of depth. I don't know if it's better than it was last year.
What about maybe something under the radar that people might be missing as far as a storyline?
Something that people might be missing as a storyline?
Was there anything through the interviews, through what you've seen on the field that maybe didn't make sense? Or is everything kind of, what we see is what we get kind of situation?
Well, I don't know. Right at this point, with what I've seen, what I've seen on the field matches up with what I expected to see, in a way, right? I'm just trying to, I'm racking my brain trying to think of what it is that I haven't talked about that we need to be keeping an eye on. That's where I'm. That's why.
I kind of threw you out there. I don't know if there is. I was just gonna say if there is, but Andrew asked a great question. The backup QB, right? So obviously Trey and Nate Sudfeld have a really good relationship together, but that quarterback room has been an Achilles heel for the 49ers. If the starter goes out, not even, obviously if your starter goes down, you don't necessarily have too many hopes of, being competitive. But is Sudfeld a good enough backup to win a few games in case Trey can't start? And is there anybody behind Sudfeld that you can trust?
Here's one thing that I'll say about Sudfeld is that he's been impressive the last two practices with his legs. He did it again. He did it last week where he had some pressure and he escaped, made a move on one of the defenders, basically broke him down and was able to take off for some more yardage. Today he did something very similar. He hit his back foot, was looking, there wasn't anybody open, and he had to take off running to his right side, and he was able to make a play with his legs there as well. So that's good to see. He's not Trey Lance, but he has some mobility and the ability to run with it. And today he was solid. He talked about, there's been a lot of talk today about Trey Lance's performance because he had 4 touchdowns. So everybody gets super excited about 4 touchdowns from Trey Lance today. And that's cool. It's good. But I think you need to realize part of the reason he had 4-5 touch. When you have the ball at the 5-yard line going in,
right?
if you get a completion, it should be a touchdown, especially when you don't have anybody coming to get you in terms of a pass rush, right? Doing in 7-on-7 drills. So, like just to kind of put Trey Lance's numbers into perspective, he ran 6 plays in their red zone drill. Okay, he had one that was well covered. It was a pass breakup, and then he had 3 straight touchdown passes. Then he had the interception. And he had another touchdown pass, right? So a number of touchdown passes out of that. Well, that's good. Nate Sudfeld threw 4 passes in the same drill. All 4 of them were touchdowns. So, I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to be pushing Trey Lance. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm saying is he's showing well in practice. He's making plays. He's able to get the ball out at times. So it's a drop off, but I don't know if it's quite as big of a drop off as people were expecting it to be, including myself.
And that's great news because this is the NFL. So to expect Trey to be an Iron Man and start all 17 games in the regular season, that would be great if he could. But if that isn't the case, it is for a lot of teams, to have a quarterback that could come in and play well in a half or play well, if they need to start and be able to still be competitive, that's a good sign. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Jack, we're coming up on 52 minutes. That's pretty much what I had. Anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Well, the one other thing, since you're asking me, and TC 49er mentions it here, and Juwan Jennings is for real, and that's right. He had a strong day-to-day, and this is a guy who right now is the number 2 receiver on the 49ers because Deebo Samuel's not there. So, if you're looking for storylines, look for Juwan Jennings to continue to grow and maybe what he's going to be bringing to this team. He's Kyle Shanahan said today that Jennings is ahead of where he was at this point last year. Makes sense considering the fact that they've had more workouts this year than they have in the last 2. This is their first non-COVID year out of the last, since 2019. So these younger guys are able to get up to speed a little bit quicker. And real quick too, before I move on, I want to shout out Raphael 5629ers, who became the newest member of the Jackhammer Toolbox.
I like that. Beautiful, Jack. Well, that's all I got for you, big guy. Tell these guys what they have to look forward for you on this channel the rest of the week.
Well, I mean, I've got we've got mini camp all week, the next 2 days as well. So we got mini camp tomorrow and Thursday. So that'll be happening. I won't be doing a double shift tomorrow. It'll just be the mini camp report after practice. And then I'll be back on Thursday with mini camp report, and then get on with Jesse for the Hammer and Nail show on Thursday night. That's what's going on my channel, Suneil. But real quick, what's going on in yours?
So obviously I don't have sideline expertise like you, Jack. But right after this, I'm going on with Jesse for our weekly Tuesday night show. Tomorrow I have Rohan Chakravarti of 49ers Web Zone on my channel. That'll be 7 p.m. Pacific. So we're going to be chatting about what we are hearing and reading from minicamp. But other than that, nothing really planned. If any breaking news, I'll probably come on and share my thoughts. But if you guys haven't subscribed to my channel, if you can head over to So Real Sports Talk. My Twitter handle is right there. The link is on my Twitter. So if you are Twitter, go ahead, follow me, subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the season starts. So I think I'm about a little over 100 away, like 110, 112 away from 1,000, Jack. So that's the goal.
So there you go. So if you're following me and you like what you see on my channel, obviously while you're here, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. But do me a favor, get over to So Real Sports Talk TV and show Suneil some love. He's a real good 49er fan. He's intelligent with his takes. He's putting some good stuff out even on Twitter that I enjoy. Sometimes he gets me mad because he said something that I want to say, but he says it before me, so I leave it alone. So but give the guy some love over on his channel if you could. That'd be fantastic. Like I said, before you leave though, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you like what you're seeing and you're not subscribed already. Hit the like button as well. That always helps with the YouTube
algorithms.
Algorithms, exactly. And then join the toolbox. I set that up over the weekend. It's all there. Going to be coming out with some cool Jack Hammer Show T-shirts and things like that for you guys. So keep it locked in. We're going to have a lot of fun.
I love it.
There you go. So that's our show for tonight. Take care, everybody. Stay healthy. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will be back tomorrow with Training Camp Report.